Law of motion, I'm going to be hitting a baseball off of the tee. This is an example of the first law of motion because it demonstrates a ball sitting perfectly still on the tee and it changing its motion by the force of the bat hitting the baseball. Second example of the first law of motion, I'm going to be dropping a ball out of my hand. This is an example of the first law of motion because it demonstrates a gravitational force on the ball once it is left out of the hand. Example of the first law of motion, I'm going to catch the ball. This is an example of the first law of motion because it demonstrates an object not changing its motion unless a force is acted upon it. In this case, the force is the glove stopping the baseball's motion. Example of the second law of motion, I'm going to be pushing a cart. This is an example of the second law because it demonstrates how the acceleration produced by the equal or greater force of me is making the cart push because I am producing more force than the ground is pushing up on the cart. Example of the second law of motion, I will be hitting a baseball off of the tee. This is an example of the second law of motion because it demonstrates how something that is not moving produces acceleration by the amount of force that is applied to the baseball. For example, my second law of motion, I will be throwing a baseball. This is an example of the second law of motion because it demonstrates how much force that I put in the ball to make it accelerate. First example of the third law of motion, I will be hitting a ball that is soft tossed. This is an example of the third law because it has action and reaction of somebody throwing me the ball and the bat causing a great force as same as the bat hitting the ball. Second example of the third law of motion, I will be throwing the ball into the net. This is the law of action and reaction because when I throw the ball into the net, the force of the ball makes the net go back, acting like it is catching the ball. The third example of the third law of motion, I will be slapping Ricky across the face. This is an example of the third law because it shows an action of me hitting Ricky on the cheek of his face and the cheek hitting my hand back.